On a telephone line, I welcome to the program a legendary American heavy metal drummer, recording artist who has played with Virgin Steele, Riot V, and others. I welcome in the great Frank Gilchriest. Frank, Brian C., honored to have you.
Good morning, Brian. Thank you very much. Honored to be here. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So, Frank, let's start in the very beginning. Fascination with music and fascination with drums. Take it away.
Well, yeah, at an early age, for no particular reason at all, I started collecting all my mother's pots and pans and my father's old used paint cans and whatnot, and setting up makeshift drum sets in the basement. It was a surprise to everyone in the house. My parents, nobody knew really where it came from. I guess it was instinct. But I think maybe from watching Animal on the Muppets, that was probably the extent of my exposure to drumming at that point. But I started doing that, and it just grew from there, and I loved it. And then I joined the school band, of course. I had a wonderful school band teacher, Mr. Van Helden. In fact, like 20-something years later, when I started making records, I used to thank my original band director I had, like 25 years ago, on all my records. And it was kind of funny because my guitar player in Virgin Steele used to see that name on the record. We never discussed it. But one day a guy came into the store that he managed, and he had that last name. And my guitar player mentioned to this guy, Mr. Van Helden, did you have a student name? And he said he remembered me, and he showed him the record and stuff. It was pretty cool. But he was very, very great music teacher. So he was good. And then, I played in a very musical neighborhood. It was incredible, like the amount of music that was going on back then. We didn't have video games and stuff, and probably not even really, not even cable TV at that point. Your regular standard, whatever it is, 9 channels, and with your old coat hanger on as serving as the antenna, back when there were dinosaurs, I suppose. But I did that, and a lot of the guys played music, and my best friend happened to be. Anyway, all the kids in the neighborhood bought drums. Everyone wanted to be a drummer, but most of them would give up after 6 months or a year. So I would go around to everybody's houses and stuff and buy their old snare drums that they didn't want anymore for very cheap. And people just, parents usually were happy to get those noisy things out of the house. And then I at one point, I had a drum set in my basement. It was like 15 old snare drums. It was just snare drums, nothing else. And in a circle. And it used to kind of remind me of Keith Moon because I saw a picture of him like that. And so I liked that. And everybody in the neighborhood played, was pretty serious. My best friend growing up was John Mayung, who became the bass player, of course, in Dream Theater. And John Vitucci grew up in that neighborhood. And there were a lot of other guys. I mentioned them because they just won a Grammy. And they all influenced us and trained us. It was funny, John Mayung was a virtuoso violinist and piano player, and it was me who kind of asked him to play bass for me in a band. And it's probably the best decision I ever made because prior to that, I didn't even know you were supposed to, practice a lot. He was like, no, you got to practice and put all of these hours in and do these drills and exercises to get good. I remember saying, I thought you get better by drinking beer. And when I was 16, I was like, you mean you don't get better at music by drinking beer? No. So, so I had a lot of early influences. And we played a lot of concerts. We played, in parks, and we played it, especially during graduation time. We played at all the graduation parties and stuff like that. And we played literally even at marathons, and there would be a marathon for a charity. We'd set up along the road and just jam. So there was a lot of music in the neighborhood. And Rob Reddy was another fella. He's actually a very popular jazz artist right now. And there's a lot of guys from that neighborhood, even generations after us. It's a very strange thing. People joke around about Kings Park. They say there must be something in the water there because it's a very, very musically rich town. It still is. So that was my early years. Then as soon as I graduated high school, as soon as I could get my foot in a car, I was playing in bands all over the place. But a good thing that happened to me, I know we had mentioned, I talked to you earlier, we talked about the Good Rats, and I was making kind of a name for myself a little bit playing, and Peppi Marchello, who lived a few towns over from me, who's the leader of the Good Rats, singer-songwriter, he had heard about me, and he got in touch with me. He called me up on the phone. I don't even know how he got my phone number, but he called, I was living with my parents, of course, and he called, and he was like, you know who I am? I was like, yeah, of course I know who you are. I got your records and stuff. I love you guys. And he was like, I've heard some good things about you. I want you to come over to my house and play your drums for me. I was like, wow. He gave me the address, and he lived on a private road. It was totally foreign territory for me. I had a little beat-up old Toyota Corolla. I had all of the seats removed from it. It was just the driver's seat. I took out the back seat and the passenger seat, so I had one big cavernous cavity there, and I would load up my entire drum set in that thing. And it was funny because some nights I would take the guys out in the car to drink beer and drive around or whatever, and they'd have no seats. They'd be flopping all over the place. But so I played for him, and he was like, I really like the way you play, and I spent the whole day with him. I went over there, set everything up. It was like an all-day-long thing, just chit-chatting, asking me, can you play this, can you play that, you ever try this, try that. You know, he put on some of his music. I want you to try to play along to this. And it went on for a couple hours, at the end of which he was very nice and honest. He was like, you're good. I can see what people are talking about, but you're not quite there yet. And he was like, here, take a bunch of my CDs and stuff, records back then, cassettes actually, and keep listening to them because in a few years I might need you. So I packed up all my stuff. I drove out of there. I was like, well, I'll never hear from that guy ever again. But I did continue to play and play in a lot of bands constantly. I was in and out of a million. Back then, like, Long Island was crazy. You got to remember, like, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, there were 4 or 5 like bars open or pubs or whatever you want to call it with live music. I mean, it was like a robust live scene. Like, it's a totally different world now. But I mean, that would go on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, 5, 6 bands at all different places. So, yeah.
And I wanted to say, Frank, and you know, being from New York City myself, the Good Rats, they had a big New York cult following in the early 70s.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, so what happened was, yeah, they were huge. I mean, they were one of the first real big bands to break from New York, and a lot of people say they paved the way for everyone and everything that came after it, that they were the trendsetters. They're the one who put, like, Long Island and this scene on the map, so to speak, with that kind of heavy rock music. So a few years later, he called me out of the blue again, and he said, have you been practicing? And I said, in fact, I have been. And he goes, good, because I need you. And I was like, real? I couldn't believe it. It was like 4 years later. And he called me up, and he was like, I need you Friday night. And he was like, he gave me a list of like 50 songs. And I was like, I can't learn all of this by Friday. And he was like, you better. And he hung up. And I went, and I think we did like one rehearsal where we didn't even play all the songs. We played the gig, and I did pretty good, but I made some mistakes. And I thought he would never have me back. I thought he was going to fire me. I was like, packing up my stuff, and I was like, wow, one and done, I'm finished. And he came over, and he was like, you kind of had a tough night, didn't you, kid? I was like, yeah, Mr. Marchello, I'm very, very sorry. I'll practice harder. I'll learn it better. And he paid me, and then he gave me an extra $50. And I was like, what's this for? And he was like, I know you tried your heart out. This is for you. Keep trying. And he actually gave me a tip, even though I had made a lot of mistakes. And that was the beginning of a relationship where he became almost like a surrogate father to me. He was like, you know, I had my dad, of course. I loved him. We had a great relationship. But as a music mentor and whatnot, Peppi kind of became a father to me. I thought I was a really good drummer when I joined them. I could play Rush. I could play Led Zeppelin. I could play all of that stuff. But that music requires you to know every style. And he's a very demanding band leader. And he got the best out of everyone. That band was like a music college. It's like a lot of guys went through there and then went on to join Kiss and Billy Joel and a lot of other stuff, big stuff. John Michelli, who I replaced, I replaced him because he went and joined Meatloaf. So, like, a lot of guys went through the Good Rats and became incredible musicians by working with Peppi. He was really an interesting guy, wonderful man, and big heart, very intelligent. His music was really smart. And, I mean, he was known that he could have sold out and wrote simpler songs and more radio-friendly songs and probably been even a bigger name. But he had the song where he said, I'd rather clean the cages in the zoo than to change my songs for you. You know, he was a very independent guy. He was very politically incorrect. He was a very wild dude. I don't even think a guy like that could exist today. You know, he wasn't afraid to challenge everything and anything around him, you know, from every which kind of like South Park meets like Metallica or something. I don't know. It's interesting. But yeah, so what happened was playing all of those years with Peppi, and I mean, I played 5-6 nights a week with him for like 5 years. I mean, we played almost every night. And and for 3 hours a clip. Like, we would play 3-hour sets, and I got really good, I thought I was good before I joined that band, but that band really put the finishing touches and took it to another level. I was forced to, and I enjoyed it. And what happened with that is really what got me ready for the world stage. That's kind of what got me prepared to be able to get on planes and fly around the world and play in front of thousands of people. If I didn't have that experience, I don't know if I would have been ever ready. And it's kind of weird. It was a very natural progression. None of it was really prescribed. It just happened. And so what happened was, just as my time was winding down with the Good Rats, because his younger son was playing the drums and he wanted to be in the band, of course. And once he was old enough and skilled enough, Peppi was like, in another year or two or something like that, I'm probably going to bring my kid in. I was like, I understand that. And that kind of ended when that happened. And like a day later or something, I got a call from Virgin Steele, and they were doing a tour in Europe. And I met with them, and it was funny. That was an interesting situation too, because like I spoke to Dave, the lead singer, and like we had like a meeting, and we just talked and hung out, and it was like, and I always tell people this, like, you can't underestimate the value of being like a knowledgeable person and be able to handle a conversation and be able to handle yourself correctly with important people, because he wanted to, I was like, I thought I was going to his house to actually play. I thought he had a drum set there or something, but he didn't have anything. He just wanted to talk to me. And we wound up talking about literature, and he was impressed that I knew about poetry, and because I was an English major in college. My first go-around, I was an English major, and I graduated with a degree. And he's very into the old myths and legends and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. Shakespeare, his dad did Shakespeare production. So we hit it off and talked for hours, and it was like the drumming just was like, okay, it was almost a secondary thing. But that really was a great experience. Back then we were touring like nonstop all the time. I would go away like constantly, and I did that for years and years and years and years before there was any YouTube or cell phones or anything. It's kind of funny now, because when I think back and look back at it, I mean, like, I was doing all that, and it was like zero. I would just go away. My friends and family and stuff, nobody knew what I was doing. Like, I mean, you'd have to get like a German magazine or something like that, or a magazine from Italy that would cover it. But it was not really, what we were doing wasn't really getting covered over here by anything. So it was just, people would be like, what are you doing over there? I'm like, oh, I'm playing in stadiums in front of thousands of people. They'd be, what? Yeah, and today everybody has every move they made and what they had for breakfast, like, posted all over the internet. But back then it was much different. So I did that, and that was great. Made many records and got a lot of experience and made a lot of friends. And that kind of like led me into, we toured with Riot at one point. We did like a 7-week tour with Riot, Virgin Steele and Riot. That was a great tour. And I got to know Mark Reale really well. And, yeah, it was interesting because we finished that tour, and they went their way, and we went our way. But we all vowed to stay in touch, and we kind of did. And then one day I got a call from Mark, like 3 years later after the tour had ended. And he was like, man, I really feel like just cranking up my guitar really loud and playing it. I was like, that's cool, man. He was like, you got a studio where I could just totally blast? And I was like, yeah, I do. I have my own studio. And he was like, you mind if I come down and just, like, crank my guitar up? I really feel like hearing a guitar. I can't do it where I live. He was like, I feel like hearing my guitar at, like, 8 or something, like, blast, and I just missed the sound of it. I was like, yeah, sure. So he came down to my studio, and I thought he just wanted to play by himself. I actually was like, here's a key. If you got to leave, I'm going to go to 7-Eleven and get a coffee or something. He was like, where you going? I want to play with you. I was like, oh, really? I thought you just wanted to. So we started jamming on cover tunes and just hanging out. And that became, to back up for a minute, like, one thing about Peppi, and then like Dave as well, like, Dave kind of became like, it was the same thing. Like, he became like a little bit of a father figure as well. Like, maybe not so much as Peppi, because I was a little younger with Peppi, but in a large respect, Dave helped to raise me as a drummer. He took me into I never recorded with Peppi. Dave took me to the next step and brought me into recording studios, like, constantly. And we talked a lot. We were friends, and he became like a friend, a father, a band member. There was a little bit of the relationship wasn't just so, like, simple. Like, he was at times a fatherly figure, a brother, a best friend, and especially in the studio, because I didn't have any experience. The first time I cut a track with Virgin Steele in the studio, he brought me in, and all of the pictures and stuff on the guy's wall. The guy had a studio with all like records hanging up and posters on. All of it came crashing down. The studio guy came running in. Oh my God! What the? You know, and Dave was like, "I told you, I'm bringing in a real heavy hitter now. Like this guy is a killer." So the guy had to take all of his pictures and stuff off the walls before he could record me.
And Frank, I want to quickly say the marriage. I want to quickly say the marriage of heaven and hell part 2 is where the first time we can hear your talent with Virgin Steele, right?
Yes. Yep. That's exactly right. What happened was they had the record almost complete, and things fell apart with their previous drummer, and that's when they brought me in, and I did the last couple of tracks. And yep, absolutely. So Dave became like kind of like a fatherly figure as well. And I learned a lot by playing in the studio and making records with him. A lot of long records with a lot of complicated arrangements and different types of stuff. And it really taught me how to be a team player and think like beyond just the drums that I'm playing, to think of the whole song. That's really hard for like a young person. I would go in and I'd have all of these like dreams of doing these big giant drum fills and doing the solo in this spot and all that. And it's like, meanwhile, it doesn't really, you don't realize it because you're getting carried away with yourself, but it wasn't really fitting with the song. And he helps do a lot of like nice trim work on me, so to speak. I was a wild boar. Full of wild energy and just passion. And that's what these older kind of band leaders always saw in me, that they could kind of like work with me and just like, channel me in their direction, so to speak. And the same thing kind of happened with Mark. We started very simple, and then one thing led to another, and he was like, we were doing cover songs. We were doing like just jamming his friends. Like I felt like I was back in high school. That's what I was telling people. I'm like, Mark Reality just comes to my studio. We jam, we talk, we just hang out. I was like, I feel like I'm back in high school again. It was funny, And eventually he started showing me his riffs and stuff. He was like, I love the way you play. What would you play on this? And what would you play on that? And it was just him and I. For like 3 years, we kind of put together Army of One very, very slowly at a nice, relaxed pace. He was like, he wasn't that well with his health, so sometimes he would need to take a little while off to recover and stuff. But we eventually put that record together, and then we got the other guys to come back, and they joined in, and then we started touring all over the world, and that's how I got involved with Riot. And then they did like a reunion record with the guys from the Thunder Steel lineup, and I was like, okay, that was cool. And I never thought I'd play with Mark again. Then the next thing I know, he passed away, and then I was like, oh, well, now for sure I'll never play with Riot again. But then a few years later, they called me up, and they were like, they're doing like a little memorial tribute type of tour. Some promoter in Europe wants to put it together. Well, I'd like to be a part of it. I was like, sure. And we did that, and kind of like never looked back, really. People loved it and wanted more music, and the record companies wanted more music too. Like, a lot of people don't realize that, but the record company was like, the band still like owes us records, We don't care like if somebody's not here anymore. Like the band Riot owes us a record, so if you're going to be Riot, you got to give us a record. So, but that's what the 5 is. It's actually not Riot V, it's a Riot 5. We put the 5 there to signal like it's the 5th chapter of the band, because the band has had 5 singers. So this is the 5th singer, so that's what that's for. To let people know, like, we're not trying to pretend we're like the Riot that existed in 1983. We're like, grew out of it naturally, but there's a little thing there to let you know, like, out of respect for what came before us and stuff, to change the name a little bit. Actually, Mark's dad, because when this thing started heating up again, the guys went to Mark's dad, and they're like, what do we do? People want us to keep playing, but it really was your son's band. What should we do? And he was like, well, I wanted the music to keep being played. I want you guys to keep playing it. You're the guys. But just change the name a little bit, just a little bit, so it shows a little respect. And, we took the wisdom from the old man and put the little 5 at the end. So we've been doing that. We're on our 3rd record now, and we put out 2, and it went really well. The 2nd record did really good. Actually, in Japan, I got voted like the 18th best drummer in the world or something like that. My friends sent me the cover of the Burn magazine that it was on, which is a big magazine over there. I thought it was a practical joke, because it was like my name was right next to John Bonham and Neil Peart and Mike Portnoy. Wow. Yeah, it was like right in there, like with Nico McBrain, Tommy Lee, all the drummers I grew up worshiping and wanting to play like. like all of them were like in it. I was like, ha, 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 that's a good one, dude. And then my friend was like, no, dude, that's real. I was like, that's real? He was like, yeah, that's real. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, you're like metal's hidden secret. We were talking about that before the show.
Yeah, that is true. You know, I kind of am, and people have told me that because I've been on like over like almost 25 records. I've lost track. I mean, I've also done like one-offs with other metal bands and stuff, like a lot of them. I've played on more records than most people could ever dream of. Like most people play on like 3 or 4 records in their life if they're lucky. I'm on like something like 20-something records, plus live records, and I've been playing like nonstop. I mean, I really haven't stopped except for the pandemic. I had one summer I had to take off because I had an ankle surgery, but aside from that, for almost like 30 years, I've been like constantly playing like regularly around the world. Yeah, I wouldn't even have social media. I'm just not like, I'm very humble. I don't really like to brag that much and try to like, you know, I just like doing it. I don't really like talking about it or promoting it that much. I just like being a musician and playing music and loving art and creativity and working with people and making fans happy and making connections. You know, I don't really, it's tough for me in the modern world, so to speak, because this stuff with the computers and the social media, this all came after I was already kind of established. So I wasn't raised on it. I didn't build my career on social media. I built it by going around the world and playing the drums. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of like, you know, I don't have
Frank,
Instagram. I don't have Twitter. I don't have Instagram. You know, I'm not like posting what I had for breakfast every 5 seconds. You know, so. And
I'm looking at your resume. I mean, you've had an iconic career. 2012, you joined Gothic Knights, right? Talk about that.
Oh, yeah. They're a band out of Brooklyn. They're a very good band, kind of a power metal, speed metal type of band. Yeah, they just like, I don't know, sometimes what happens is bands are about to go into the studio, and for some reason, something happened with their drummer. I don't know what happened. I don't really, they might have told me the story, but I don't remember what it was. But yeah, they were like, we have a studio record to make, and we really need a drummer. So they just kind of called me up, and I helped them finish up a couple of songs that they were in the process of, and then we went ahead and we played, and I did the record with them. And I think I did a show or two. I don't remember. But yeah, it was kind of brief, but it was, you know, and we were going to continue on, but I forget exactly what happened. There's a lot of bands like that, like, that I've done, even bands that, like, you don't have necessarily a record, but they just have, like, a really good tape that they made, and they would shop in it, There's a lot of bands around that I played like that. But I come in, I'll play, you know, they're in a spot where they need a drummer, and I'm really good at learning music. I'm a music teacher, actually. Yeah, you know, I'm a university-trained classical musician myself. So, like, you know, I have a little bit of both. Like I tell people, I have the university degree, and I could tell you about Beethoven and Mozart. I can discuss all of that stuff and jazz chords. But I also like have the street credibility because I put the time in. When I was in college for music, I would literally like get on a plane like sometimes Thursday night, go play a show in Spain, and then be back in class like Tuesday morning, sitting in a little chair. The teacher yelling at me and stuff. You don't know anything about music. Like I just played in front of 25,000 people. That doesn't mean anything, you know. You know, so it's funny, but I bring a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge and practical experience in street. So I have a lot. So I like to help bands out when I can. I've worked with some bands in South America and other bands in Europe and stuff. And oh yeah, Gothic Knights was great. They're Brooklyn guys. And I don't know. I see that they're playing again, which is great. I just saw recently that they're playing again. With who I forget. There's a pretty good band coming around, and they're on the bill. So I'm happy for them that they're still going. Yeah, like guys like us, you know, we just don't give up. You know, it's like hard for us. Like so many people that I knew when I was in my 20s and even 30s, like that were like really like serious about music, but so many of them just fell by the wayside, like when they didn't strike gold and become a millionaire, or they found out the harsh reality of what the business is really like. But there's only like some of us like myself who just are diehards and just live for it and love it. And I've rearranged my life so I can pursue my musical passions, you know. I've started a business so I could take off whenever I wanted. And I did. I wouldn't have been able to do half this stuff if I didn't. I had to seize control of all aspects of my life so I could be a musician and an artist. And, you know, it's not an easy path, and it takes a lot of sacrifice. Sometimes it's easier just to get a job, you know, just a nice 9-to-5 job and ride easy. But the path of an artist, a musician, a struggling drummer, a heavy metal banger, it's a wild road.
Yeah, and Frank, they're telling me I have 1 minute left. So what's in the pipeline for you? What's going on in the near future?
Well, we're finishing the new Riot V record right now. It's like literally, like it could be done today, like literally any second. We've been putting the final touches on it. That will come out in the spring, maybe early summer. But then we go out and we promote it and we play. We have a bunch of shows in Spain, and I believe in May we're going to Spain and we're going to Greece again to headline the festival. We have festivals all over in Europe and stuff. We have festivals out in September. We're going to be at a couple in Wisconsin, and we have some things. We're doing a lot more American stuff these days, so more American things are coming in. And I think it's just because of the traveling. You know, the traveling, it's been rough. Even post-COVID has been a nightmare for bands and stuff, even after COVID. We're still not back to where we need to be because, there's a lot of logistics in these things. But, yeah, so we have a lot of shows coming up. The new record's coming out. We're going to be doing a lot of promotion and press for it, and onward and upward from there, you know. I released my own single during the pandemic called Rise Again. It's on YouTube. It's a video. It's basically just like an anthem to, you know, tell people to keep positive. We're going to get out of this and kind of pay tribute to the frontline workers and stuff. And I'll probably release another single tune soon. I have another one in the works that I like to release them every so often. So I'm going to have another single released soon. But between that and this record and what's coming up, you know, it's a pretty full plate for me. I might do something else. I've been talking to some other friends of mine in Connecticut that have a festival coming up, and I might play that one, Hell's Heroes. I did it last year with Riot V. I might do it again this year with somebody else. I'm not exactly sure yet if it'll all work out, but it's always something, you know. There's always something coming at me. I'm always a challenge, you know. So
well,
I
listen,
love it. But thank you very much for having me. Sorry I never shut up, and I'm sorry I didn't ask more questions.
No, you did a fantastic job. I really appreciate it.
I told you I'm a motor mouth. That's one of the
fantastic job.
It's one of the reasons why bands like to play with me. I'll be honest, because like on the road, I'm very funny and I keep everybody entertained. I might not be that great of a drummer, but man, I'm funny to travel with. That's good too, you know.
Great performance today. Great performance. We'll keep in touch. The legendary Frank Gilchriest, Riot V. Until next week, happy collecting to all.